Hi guys and gals, my name is Thomas Hansen and I'm one of the magicians over at Aista. And in this video I am going to show you how to automatically generate your unit tests. So here I have Magic and it's a brand new dashboard. As you can see, I can browse around here and have a look at my databases. I can look at HyperID, etc, etc. However, most importantly for this particular YouTube video is the link you find underneath analytics here, referred to as assumptions. An assumption is basically an automatically generated integration test or unit test if you wish. It's not entirely correct to refer to them as unit tests because they are much higher level abstractions. Now, what you're basically looking at is a persisted HTTP endpoint invocation, allowing me to actually replay this invocation. So let me demonstrate how you can use these guys in your own code. And for this particular exercise, I am going to go into Tools. I'm going to choose HyperID. Then I'm going to, because I already have this module, so let me just delete this. This is probably not something you need to do unless you've already CRUDified your Sakila database previously. Now I'm going to CRUDify my Sakila database. If you don't have the Sakila database, you can actually load the Sakila database, create the database script here and execute it. However, I already have the Sakila database here, as you can see, so I don't need to do that. If you need to actually create the Sakila database, you need to refresh your server-side cache. So anyways, with the semantics out of the picture, let's get started. So now I am going to use the CRUDifier here from HyperID. I'm going to choose the Sakila database, and at this point I can CRUDify all my tables. As you know, I can apply read, write, in authorization requirements, override the URLs, publish signal messages upon write invocations, etc, etc. I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to actually CRUDify one table, and I'm going to CRUDify my actor table, and that's really it. And now, of course, Magic produces HTTP endpoints for me automatically, which I can immediately invoke. Here, for instance, I can retrieve all actors in my database, etc. Of course, as you probably seen in previous YouTube videos, this is how you automatically generate HTTP CRUD web API endpoints using Magic. However, the crucial parts which I want to illustrate in this particular YouTube video is that once I have done an invocation, I can actually click a new assumption here. And I can save my assumption, and I can call it Sakila.actors.get, for instance. Verifies that you can retrieve actors from your Sakila database. And that's it, really. And actually what this does when I click save here now is that it actually records my HTTP invocation. Then it actually persists it as an assumption, at which point when I later want to sanity check the health of my system, I can go into analytics, I can click assumptions, and I can actually see my assumption here. And of course, when I now execute all assumptions, which I'm doing now, Magic executes 120 something assumptions, then my newly created assumption will be a part of this particular test suite. So this allows me to actually invoke an HTTP endpoint and persist that invocation to replay it later with a unit test assumption, assuming its HTTP response somehow resembles the response I am assuming that the HTTP endpoint should return. So now at this particular point, for instance, if my Sakila database drops for some reasons or whatever, then the assumption will fail. Now, of course, what we did just now wasn't probably such a very useful assumption. So let's create one which is slightly more useful. Okay, Magic, Sakila. Let's do, for instance, actor put, right? Now, when we invoke this endpoint, obviously, the actor ID is a mandatory argument. we delete this thing, for instance, and we click invoke, then we will get mandatory argument actor ID not given, field actor ID. Why is this important? Well, because if I don't provide a primary key to my update HTTP endpoint, then my database will return 86,342 records affected. That's a bad thing for the record. So at this point, I can actually take this invocation and I can persist it. Sakila, verify, actor, mandatory primary key, right? Verifies that you cannot invoke this endpoint without providing it with a primary key. Ta-da! And at this point, I actually want to match the response. You see this checkbox down here? It actually allows me to inform Magic of whether or not I actually want the response resulting JSON object to be an exact replica or not. If I check it off like this, it won't check the response. Check it on like this, it will actually check and verify that the response is the exact same response as when I invoked this endpoint just now. Which for this particular use case is very valuable. But for other use cases where you're counting items and stuff like that from your database might not necessarily be all that useful. However, for this particular endpoint invocation, it's actually very useful. So now I can go back and I can go and find my assumptions. I can filter on Sakila. I can find this guy and I can actually see how Magic persists my assumption. Now, this is the default automatically generated assumptions, allowing me to automatically have Magic creating unit tests for me, more or less by simply clicking a button. However, there also exists alternative mechanisms. You see, in order to understand these, let's first use tools, HyperID here, and let's expand. Actually, let's hide this guy. Let's expand our etc. folder and our tests folder, and at which point we will gain access to a couple of HyperLambda files, which actually are our assumptions. However, I can also create my own assumptions here manually by creating a new file. I can call it test foo, okay? And then .hl. Of course, it needs an HL file ending. At this point, I can write description. This is an assumption that tests foo. Okay, .lambda, very important syntax here for the record. At this point, I can do .no1 int 2, .no2 int 2. Then I can verify that 2 plus 2 equals 4. If not, map dot add at no1 get value at no2 dot eq equals dot int 4 dot lambda throw assumption failure math adds error. And I can now save this assumption. I can open up, for instance, another browser window, go to my assumptions, see if we can find it, management and analytics, and here we go. And we can filter for foo, at which point you will see my assumption. And ta-da, assumption succeeded. If I now change this assumption to, if I change, for instance, one of my integers here to 3, and I save it, and I reload my assumption, I think I probably need to do it like this. Actually, I think I need to refresh the page. If I now find the foo assumption, now you will see that the second integer here is 3. Obviously, that does not add up to 4, at which point, when I run this particular assumption, it will fail. And as you can see here now, assumption failed, and we will be getting a log entry, which I can show you here now. If I open up another dashboard window, go to analytics, log, and I look at this guy, you will see that I have an assumption test failed error log invocation with the file name of my assumption and the exception message here, actually. And of course, the point being that when I come here and I check all my assumptions simultaneously by clicking the play button, which will automatically execute every single assumption in my system, what I'm left with after my assumptions have executed are my assumptions that failed, allowing me to easily sanity check my Magic server by simply clicking one button. Why is this important? Well, I mean, as enterprise software developers, we know for a fact that, we are rarely, if ever, given enough time to create unit tests. Why management always tells us that it's important, they will always ask us if we are writing unit tests when we are doing the job interviews. However, when shit hits the fan, they never have the time to allow us to actually create unit tests. So basically, Magic automatically creates your unit tests for you. That was it for this particular video. There's a link in the description of this video where you can download Magic. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.